Mayor Bottoms saying that her news there was that she was signing an administrative order that would take their grievances and their solutions. But I thought it was interesting that she said this wasn't just for Atlanta. She hoped it would become a model for the nation. She has, to me, emerged as a real national figure, very aware of this moment, not just in her city, but in her country.
Absolutely. And we're seeing Black women who are mayors of major cities around this country leading the conversation about transformation, from London Breed in San Francisco to Lori Lightfoot in Chicago, Muriel Bowser in DC. I think what's so important about this moment is that it's a struggle to move from tinkering to transformation, because the pain we heard from the family is a pain that resonates deeply now, and fortunately not just within the Black community, but within the white community, that it is a painful loss when we see these videos and recognize that people are dying, but they're not just dying, they're also being over-policed. So what's so important is that she's both putting together a task force to say, we have to look at how we're changing this in bigger ways. London Breed said, we have to look at how to move all of the calls we get for police officers from the police department that shouldn't go there. That, you know, we have to recognize in this country that we have arrests every 3 minutes, but 5%, only 5% of calls to police departments are for serious crimes. 5%. So we have to disentangle this notion of addressing crime and creating public safety with more police presence and more police interaction for things that are not crimes. And I really heard the effort here, both on the part of Atlanta, but in other cities, driven by Black women mayors, to try to move beyond this notion of just making sure there's justice after we've lost a life, to trying to make sure that we don't lose one. And so when she says we want to make it an obligation for police officers to intervene when something is going wrong, that obligation becomes a way to prevent a time of mourning and rather find a path for transformation.
Maya, you're right. I mean, the transformation is in able hands, in the hands of those 4 women. But why do we need a transformation for a police officer not to shoot an unarmed Black man in the back?
Well, this goes straight to this question of what are we policing? Because often the reason we need a transformation is that policing has been about control and containment of Black and Latino people. And if we don't acknowledge that in this society, that what we're doing is saying, we fear you and we think we need to contain you, that we won't transform out of this problem. And that's why the fact that police are called so frequently for things that are not serious criminal activity becomes a strategy to disrupt what are really these deeply embedded biases, these deeply embedded fears about who Black and Latino people are. We have a president of the United States who said Mexicans are rapists. We have a president of the United States that said there are just gunshots on every street corner in Black communities. That's just not true, but it's still driving our policing. And it's still driving the way we budget our policing, and it's still driving the way we conceptualize our policing. So rather than problem solving, rather than partnering, we have policing that punishes. And that can be changed when we have a peace dividend that is 3 decades of historic lows in violent crime and 95% of police calls being about things that you could get something very different in response to, say, if you're homeless and are having a mental illness moment, that there are other people who should be called and deployed. But if we don't get past race, if we don't get past our stereotypes, if we don't get past the fear mongering that police unions ratchet up in our communities every time they want to protect police officers who do wrong, then we won't ever get to doing right.
I know we have lots of friends to talk to, Maya, but I have another question. I've watched the video that I think is just bystander video. So if there's other video that comes out, I will look at that video too. But the video that I've seen shows an interaction that isn't violent at all. Shows that he was sleeping. I mean, they spend 26 minutes together before this goes south. I mean, it seemed like there were 26 minutes to keep this person alive, and that it ended in the police murdering him. Can you just talk about how the more you see, the footage makes it worse? It makes it worse. I mean, this wasn't someone they encountered who was erratic or hostile. This was a 25-minute interaction that was pretty standard until it wasn't. Can you talk about how in this, here's some of the video where it goes badly off the rails. A taser is allegedly taken from the officer, and that's when he's shot in the back. But can you talk about what maybe happens in those 25 minutes to make sure it doesn't end the way it ended for Mr. Brooks?
Absolutely. So let's start with the fact that the police are called because a car is not moving in the drive-through of a fast food restaurant. Again, not a serious crime. So we have a car that needs to be moved. They start to have a conversation with him, and they start to get concerned that, is he tired? Is he under the influence of alcohol? You know, obviously we don't want anyone driving a car who's under the influence of alcohol, but the immediate risk to the public is if he is driving the car, not if he is just standing around. So the question becomes, what do you do when the primary issue is getting the car out of the way and getting the man home safely, safe for himself, safe for others, because you can summons him if you believe there's a driving under the influence. You can prevent him from getting in the motor vehicle. So the escalation that becomes the arrest is so often the problem. And, you know, this reasonableness standard that we heard Mayor Bottoms talk about is going to be one of the factors we struggle with, because in this instance, I bet the other police officer would have said, but it was reasonable because we were afraid because he was fighting us, because he didn't want to be arrested. Eric Garner in New York didn't want to be arrested. George Floyd didn't want to get in the police car. That doesn't mean it is a risk to public safety or to the lives of the officers, but it quickly turns into that. And that's why we have to have different ways of responding to these very minor incidents that can be handled differently and not by police officers who are trained, as the mayor of Atlanta said, as warriors rather than guardians.
Hey there, I'm Chris Hayes from MSNBC. Thanks for watching MSNBC on YouTube. If you want to keep up to date with the videos we're putting out, you can click subscribe just below me, or click over on this list to see lots of other great videos.